Sean, you played football in South Africa, England, and Singapore for teams like Bidvest Wits, Ajax Cape Town, Crystal Palace, Sheffield Wednesday, Chipper United, and Mamelodi Sundowns. I'm so surprised I got that right.
All that.
Um, out of that time in your career, what seems to be the standout moment?
I think there's a couple. Firstly, thanks for having me on today. I think getting my Bafana call up in 2012, I missed the World Cup due to a very bad injury. I certainly would have been in the preliminary squad. Not too sure if I would have made the last, whatever it was, 26, whatever it was. And I was told to retire. I was young, that's about 2010. And I said, there's no chance, And I was at Ajax at the time, and they were certainly fed up with all our medical bills, etc., etc. So they said, you got 6 months at your own cost to get ready, and I did. I got back in the squad, Ajax squad, and had 5 or 6 games that were just unbelievable, and then got a Bafana call up, and then signed a new 3-year deal with Ajax. So I think that was more of a pat on the back for myself. And then my debut for Sheffield Wednesday against Burnley away. My dad was in the crowd as well, which was a surprise, and there's a nice photo of me waving him after the game in one of like the Sheffield papers or something. So those are 2 sort of highlights that stand out.
Wow. And I mean, most people that play football, they want to be the striker, the midfielder. They want to be the guy getting the recognition for the goals, maybe a defender, but not many people want to be the goalkeeper. And you chose to be a goalkeeper from the age of 5, I think you said.
It's weird, yeah. My dad just put me in goals, and I never left. It was like from 5 years old all the way up to 32, 33 when I stopped playing. It was always goalkeeper. I couldn't tell you why. I think as I got older and I got taller, it sort of made sense as well. There's no point being 5 foot tall and being a goalkeeper. You're not going to get very far. But yeah, it was bizarre, and obviously had a bit of a talent and rode the wave as long as I could.
That must have taught you quite a lot of responsibility, because when things go wrong, they often turn to the goalkeeper. If the guys up front aren't scoring goals, that's one thing. But if the goalkeeper lets in one sloppy goal, then it's his fault for the whole game.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to have thick skin in this business for sure. Even though it's come through 10 other players, there's always fingers pointed at me at the end of the day. Yeah, and you can't take that too seriously, I guess. Which I think is a good metaphor for life. You can't take much too seriously these days, to be honest. But I think that's given me a lot of, I've got thick skin in life, Not much gets to me. And I think that comes from my football background, especially being a goalkeeper, to be honest.
And what lessons did you learn when it comes to decisiveness? Because as a goalkeeper, you might have a penalty shootout, and the last thing you can do is be 50-50 about what you're going to do.
I think that comes from preparation, right? So I think preparation is key, and you've mentioned penalties, and I love penalties because you're not expected to save a penalty. You can only be a hero in a penalty shootout. But yeah, I think preparation was key to be a goalkeeper or a professional sportsman, I would imagine. We used to study the strikers, the wingers, the opposition in general. But I think in terms of decisiveness, that would always come from what was prepared that week leading up to that game or training or whatever.
And besides the physical injuries, did you, with all that training and being around the fitness all the time, did you ever experience a bit of a mental burnout?
That's a good question. I don't think so. I think I was always grateful for where I was. I think to be a professional sportsman, you must realize that it could be over tomorrow. And I was very much of the opinion that I was getting paid. We spoke about this off air. I was getting paid to keep fit, to play in front of millions of people each weekend on TV, for them to build my brand, basically. To be in a team camaraderie every day where you've got 35 guys working towards a common goal, that's very rare. And I never took that for granted. And I was always the clown of the team, and I think that was my way of fitting in, and still is to this day, is that I would make people laugh. And I think as a white guy in a very predominantly black sport, you had to stand out in a way, and that's the way I stood out in my world. Was obviously through my performance on the pitch, but I'll be an absolute clown of the class or the change room, and we're all still great mates outside of football now.
Positive people that all had a common goal of leveling up and getting better.
Yeah, that's so important, eh? I think that's you are who you surround yourself with, and I still carry that today. I've got super successful mates that I surround myself with, because life is so short. You can't surround yourself with small-minded thinking people, and that's the same with sports. Obviously, with that, we all, like I said, aim towards a common goal. I've got some very good mentors in my life that I reach out to, whether that's sports or financial or business or whatever. So yeah, I've made sure, we're the CEO of our lives, so we need to take care of that and make the decisions and not rely on other people.
So you mentioned that goalkeeping could be a little bit of a lonely time at times. How did you deal with some lonely chapters in your life?
Yeah, it's weird. Like I've always enjoyed my alone time, and I think maybe that's come from football. I mean, I left South Africa at 17 to go play in Europe, and I was by myself, even though my family were in the UK. There were I went on 9 trials before someone said yes. It was a lot easier for me to give up. But something in me was just like, there's no way. It's like, you're good enough. And then went to Sheffield Wednesday. We played against Liverpool reserves, had an absolute blinder, and then 5 weeks later signed a contract. But that I did all that by myself. There was no one holding my hand. So I don't mind being lonely. I've got quite a positive mindset. I think the only time I struggled was when I was injured, and alone. That was tough, but we got through it. Nothing can be worse than that in my mind, in terms of injuries and being in a city that you don't know anybody. Because I just arrived at Ajax, really, but you start surrounding yourself with the right people, listening to the right stuff. You get through it.
And being alone and being lonely are two completely different things.
Yeah.
So sometimes you can be alone, meaning you don't have anyone around you, but you don't feel as if it's just you against the world. You still feel like you got a support system.
100%. And you see some of the biggest superstars you see on TV in Hollywood are the loneliest people in the world, but they've got everyone around them that loves them, supposedly. But I enjoy my alone time. I thrive on my alone time. I'm not discounting the fact that I've got a great family and friends or whatever, but that doesn't bother me. Yeah, I'm quite happy being alone, but I'm never lonely.
I think it's important to have that time to yourself. Otherwise, if you're always around people, you're always busy. Yeah. Sometimes you also might people please because you're around other people all the time. So you're trying to fit in. And I find, at least for me, taking that little break to figure out who I want to be, maybe, or just reflect on who I have been, and then go back into social interactions, I can come across as a completely different person.
100%, eh? That's a good point. And I'm a big believer, if you own your mornings, you own your life, So I wake up at 5, I'll meditate for 20 minutes. Hot water with lemon. You mentioned ice baths before this. I ice bath my face, actually, like in the morning, like for like a minute at a time, which is just really wakes me up. Then gym, then back home. And then already by 7:30, I've accomplished all of that. Then take my son to school, and then I'm ready. So there's no space for allowing other energies into, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of energy sappers out there, a lot of energy vampires. You've got to be very careful who you surround yourself with these days. And not everyone wants the best for you. And it's usually the closest ones to you that don't want that. So you've got to be very careful.
Did you experience that in your football career?
Oh, it's very prominent in that. You must remember, like, especially the first day you walk into a new change room, that nobody wants you there because you're there to take someone else's job. And it's a horrible place to be, and vice versa, right? So if someone else came on trial, another goalkeeper. It's not like you want the guy there, but it's all part of the process. And at the end of the day, the players are just prostitutes. If you think about it, it's the only league in the world. I'm talking about the South African league now, where the players aren't the assets. If you go to Europe, the players are the assets. Where here, it's more about the club owners and all the politics and blah blah blah. So if you take the emotion out of it, which I've learned to do as well in life, just take the emotion out of everything, you'll get a lot further.
Also, the main difference between South African and European football, would that maybe be the individualism versus the team?
Yeah, absolutely. I think South Africa or African football. I mean, South African football. We've got some amazing players. Like it's unbelievable the talent we have here. And for some reason, we can't break through overseas. And one of the biggest problems is the minute a player leaves South Africa, the agent here will lose control of the player. And so he'll do everything in his power to try to keep the player here, which is unfair. But also, you're going to Europe, you're going to -degree weathers, you're alone. You are no longer a big fish in a small pond. Everything changes. So there's no Steven Pienaars anymore, there's no Eric Tinklers anymore. It's a shame. And there's not many success stories of players leaving here. We're certainly good enough as an individual. But like you say, it's very individual here. We're there, everything's different. You eat, live, breathe football. You're training twice a day. Even physically, it's just a whole different ball game. And I don't know why that isn't adapted here, to be honest.
So at the age of 32, you decided to retire, which can be quite young for a footballer. I mean, if you look at your Messis and your Ronaldos, they might not be as good as a Sean Roberts.
Yeah, demonstrate.
But they're still playing now. Why did you decide to retire at the age of 32?
Yeah, and it's even younger being a keeper, right? So, I mean, goalkeepers go to their 40, 42 in extreme circumstances. But yeah, like we've said off air, I get bored very quickly, and I've done it. I could have played it for the next 5 or 6 years, and the same hamster wheel and blah blah blah. And we had the opportunity to go travel the world. I was married at that time. My wife and I, we didn't have kids at that time either. So we took that opportunity, and for 3 years we went to 25 different countries together. It was amazing. And, money can't buy those stories, So if we had left it a few years later and the kids came, that opportunity would never have happened. So I'm just trying to create different chapters in my life where there's a cool story to be told at the end of it.
If you're enjoying this conversation and you want more perspective, stories, and life lessons, then please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much. I read an article where you said football's not a career, it's an opportunity. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, I think I still tell this to players, is that I think football, why we're so privileged to be a professional sportsman, maybe it's not just football, but for some reason, big CEOs and big corporates like to be around or surround themselves with sportsmen. And if you're clever and you're smart and when you're still playing, you need to start building those relationships. Because like I said before, your career could be over overnight. What happens when you do stop playing? What does that transition phase look like? And that's the hardest thing for any sportsman. And if you're not prepared, it can be horrific. And 99% of these stories, just talking professional footballers in South Africa, it's not pretty. There's only so many coaches that can coach. There's only so many people that can go on TV and talk well. And it's if you're not prepared for life after football, it's a very, very dark and scary place to be.
Did you deal with that void? Did you have a bit of a loss of purpose after your career?
Big time. I hated the game afterwards. I didn't watch football. Like I said, we went traveling. I ran away basically for 3 years. And it was the hardest time of my life coming back to South Africa without a direction, because I still saw myself as Sean the footballer. I thought everybody still saw me as Sean the footballer. There's a lot of ego involved in that for sure. But you've got to transition, and then as time goes on, you can start connecting those dots in terms of, cool, this is what football's given me. How can I now put this into a new direction, a new personality, a different Sean, and build something? And I've managed to do that. Thank God.
And that's a good lesson for anyone.
Yeah.
You know, you might build a business that you're very proud of, and one day you sell your business.
Yeah.
And you've tied all of your identity to that business, or, you know, a sport that you're very good at, and all of a sudden you have a massive injury and you can't play that sport anymore. So I think it's quite a good lesson for people to not tie your identity to the things that you do, and also to have a bit of a backup plan.
Sure.
Not go, but I don't know. I'd be interested to see your opinion with that. Do you go all in, or do you have a bit of
I think
a backup plan?
Yeah, there's been so many mistakes made from our part, massive mistakes that have brought me to where I am now, where I've sort of solidified myself in a space where I'm the expert in the space, right? But I'm always improving. I'm always changing for the better, hopefully. You know, if you're not changing, if you're not adapting, you know, you're not progressing, I don't think. So I'm all in what I'm doing, with a little other little things going on the side, but nothing crazy. But certainly, where the space I'm in now is the future of sports as well. So, you know, I've managed to build it where I love people, I love sports, and I've managed to build a business around it.
And for those who don't know, what is it that you are doing now?
Yeah, so I've positioned myself as an expert in aligning emerging brands in emerging markets with sporting properties through sponsorship. So, sports betting is obviously the big one. Crypto is obviously where my big strength is. AI, gaming, renewable energy. So anything emerging, obviously these new Chinese car brands now as well. So any of those deals that will be done in the sporting space, I'm very confident that I'll be the guy to do it. Yeah, so super niche, very cool. And having the background I've had with professional sports, it opens doors a lot easier. Conversations are a lot more fluid and flowing nicely. And yeah, having a lot of fun.
Athlete management. I saw that that's something you also involved in. Did it give you a little bit of meaning after your career to look after other players that were maybe in your situation?
Absolutely. It was, it's still, I've employed someone now full time to take over that part of the business. It's still very much a passion project. I think, like I said, I've made a lot of mistakes and I'm happy to share those mistakes with other people so they don't get repeated. Unfortunately, one of the things that players don't take to is financial help, or advice, I should say. I don't know what it is. It's not just footballers, it's sportsmen in general. They just, they live for today. Tomorrow is not a problem. And there's horrific stories about, you know, what happens to players 2 years, 3 years after retirement. Like financially, it's horrific. So I try to give advice on that part. Obviously, I'm very good at the contract negotiations. But yeah, wherever I can assist, I can assist. But unfortunately, the financial parts, they're on their own because they don't want assistance.
And that must be interesting, especially in South Africa, with some people coming from a really tough upbringing, all of a sudden making it as a footballer and making lots of money, being seen on TV, and almost not knowing what to do with it.
Again, it's who you surround yourself with. So they've been told what to do with it, but it's obviously from the wrong people. There's guys having 2-3 cars. I mean, what's the point of that? But it doesn't need I don't blame the players, really. It's just a lack of education, which I get. But I think at the PSL level, things need to change. If you look at how things are run in Europe, for every, say, $1 you earn, 30 cents of that you never see as a player. It gets put away. And when you reach 35, 36 at retirement age, there's your annuity income, So that works. That should happen here. But it doesn't, unfortunately. So yeah, that's not going to change. So no point in dwelling on it. I can only help where I can help.
I think also there's a difference between looking successful and being successful.
Sure.
So some players, even outside of football, some people want to show that they are successful by buying the nice cars, having the nice house, having all these expenses, but behind the scenes, they're actually struggling financially, or they're in quite a lot of debt.
Yeah, it's hectic, eh? And some of these clubs encourage players to go buy a nice car. Look, I'm all for spoiling yourself, like, for sure. Like, you're playing for Pirates, Chiefs, Sundowns, whatever, you deserve it. But you don't need 2 of them. You don't need 3 of them. You don't need to go buy your cousin one. So it's 100% spoil yourself, but there needs to be an aspect of, I know this paycheck is only going to last the next 5-6 years if we're lucky. And there's only three clubs that already pay big money in South Africa, with Chiefs, Pirates, and Sundowns. The rest is a bit of a joke, actually. So the probability of playing for Chiefs, Sundowns, and Pirates is very small. And now you go to a lower league team or whatever, and the money isn't great, but you're still living like a high flyer. What do you think's going to happen? And there's no plan B after you retire. It's scary, man. It's frightening. And that's just football. Rugby's the same, I'm sure. Cricket's the same. Obviously, the guys in the IPL and all these guys are a different story. They're earning mega bucks. But you look at NBA, you look at NFL, and the stories, it's the same. Within 3 to 5 years, these guys are bankrupt. And they're $20, $30, $40 million deals a year. So it's not just, it's a sportsman thing. It's an ego thing. It's not wanting to listen and take advice. And I was a victim of it. I was also made some horrific decisions. But I've learned through it, and I won't make it a problem again, that's for sure.
What financial advice do you have because most of our listeners are between the ages of, I'd say, between 21 and 35. And they may be in that same age where some of them will be making a lot of good money. Some of them will be earlier in their careers. But we don't always get taught in school how to manage your money correctly.
100%.
And ego is often involved, and we buy things that maybe we don't need.
Sure.
What advice do you have for that age?
For any age, just save 20%, whatever you earn. That's it. Don't even look at it. Let it go. That's it. 20%. And you'll be fine.
I'm not expecting you to be a financial expert, but where would you put that money?
So, I do it. Obviously times have changed from when we grew up, but I put 10% or whatever I earn into crypto and 10% into normal S&P 500 or whatever, which I can't touch. And then within that, there's a emergency fund which I built up, which would cover me if shit hit the fan, unfortunately, that we covered for 8 months. So there's an emergency fund, and then 20% of what I earn is savings. 10% into crypto, and then 10% into a normal thing that's getting you 10-12% a year. That's locked up. That's my advice.
Well, if we had all taken that advice in 2012 with Bitcoin, no one would be working 100%. Anymore.
And I went to a Bitcoin meeting in 2009, and they said, just put 100,000 random. I was like, 100,000. I don't understand this. There's just no ways. And I did the math, but I think it was 2024, whatever, we're 2.3 billion or something stupid like that. But I understand it a bit now. I understand it's still the future of finance, I believe. But I'm not at the level of how to trade crypto or anything like that. But I just invested Bitcoin and a couple of other coins. That's it.
So how do players might not know how to spend their money? Maybe they do get an agent, but sometimes they still don't get the right advice. How do sports agents and managers sometimes exploit players?
Well, I think the biggest exploitation is I do believe that agents need to be qualified financial advisors of some sort. Like, I believe that. What happens now is the agents will come and do the deal and disappear. And that deal's up in the next 12 months. And then 12 months comes and all of a sudden they're your best friend again and they'll do the next deal and disappear. So I think in Europe with the bigger players, it's a one-stop shop, right? The players don't have to lift up a finger. Obviously, there's different levels and whatnot. But I think the onus is on the clubs as well to make sure these players are protected. And nothing's really done for the players, unfortunately. So like I said, the clubs are the assets here, not the players. The club owners are the assets, not the players. That has to change if we're going to progress as a nation in football. Things are improving. We've seen now we're going to the World Cup. One of the best squads we've had in years. One of the best coaches we could ask for. So yeah, the future is certainly bright, definitely, in terms of South African football. Administratively, we're getting there. There's been a couple of dodgy stories lately, but I'm excited.
So you mentioned earlier the ice baths, the meditations, and owning your morning. What do you think was one habit that gave you a competitive edge over other players?
I was the first in the training. I was the last one to leave. Yeah, I certainly wasn't the most talented of players out there, but I was certainly one of the hardest working ones that I can put my hand up and honestly say. So it's nothing airy-fairy. It's obviously I looked after myself. We ate well, didn't drink much. That's standard for any sportsman, I would hope. But yeah, I think my work ethic surpassed my peers.
How did that translate into your life outside of football?
Yeah, I think it's a great knock-on effect, right? Where instead of working hard now, I just work a lot smarter than other people. You know, I think times have changed fundamentally. I'm not going to waste my time on 30-minute coffees where it's just not necessary. You know, it's like I'm at a stage in my life now where I'm having the right conversations with the right people. And sometimes I'm only working 45 minutes a day or 3 hours a day or 2 hours a day. That doesn't necessarily, I'm not doing what it needs to be done. I'm just working a lot smarter. So I've changed that word hard to smart.
And we spoke about this a little bit before today's episode about how when things are busy, you're trying to focus on getting everything done. And then you don't get that time to work on the big picture stuff and the things that you really want to get to.
Yeah.
Sometimes working 45 minutes on something that's really important means more than a full day of work, getting there at 7 and leaving at 7.
Yeah.
But sometimes you still get that feeling of haven't really accomplished much.
Yeah, that's fine. We're not perfect. Yeah, we're gonna have those days. We're gonna have those weeks. It might be a couple of months, but it's I think to get to the point where work is fun. Like I don't work a day in my life, to be honest. I love what I do, and if you can get to that point, I think you're already 10, 20 steps ahead of the rest of the competitors, because they're doing it from a place of like not lack, but a bit of force. I think if you can get to this place, it's more of a place of flow and allowing things to come to you naturally, which takes work.
Let's take a short break and head to the coffee corner. Sean, what's your go-to coffee order and who would you like to have it with?
I always get a decaf in the wild cappuccino from Seattle. And if I could turn back time, I'd love to have it with my dad.
I read in an article that one of your ideas, which I really liked, and I think it does translate outside of football, is that even though you spend time many different countries playing for different clubs, you never wanted to burn a bridge.
Yeah, it's massive, hey? I think also in sport, when things aren't going your way, you can get emotionally invested into something and bridges naturally get burnt. Yeah, I could have burnt a lot of bridges with decisions that were made. And it just shows now how I've needed these people into my new career and how important they've become. Yeah, and if something's not aligned with me, it's not about making a big fuss about it. It's just walk away. I'm not going to disregard you as a person or fight about something. It's just, no, not right now. Thank you very much. And we move on. So it's something my dad always taught me, is no point in burning a bridge. This world is very, very small, especially in my field of work. Everyone knows everyone. And I think that's everyone's field of work, really, right? It's, you never know where you're going to need them again. And vice versa, here to assist wherever I can as well.
In business, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's about taking, you mentioned it earlier, taking the emotion out of the situation. And sometimes you might be completely in the right, your boss might be in the wrong, and you have that urge to be like, well, stuff you, you know, and burn the bridge completely. But it does limit you in the future.
100%. And in my world now, I'm dealing with a lot of people with a lot of egos. So it's you just got to let them be and do their thing, and eventually, hopefully, they'll come back, you know. But yeah, especially in my business, you can't burn a bridge because it's such a small middle industry. And there's always, you know, with my thing, there's always 3 or 4 potential life deals that are potentially happening, you know, and most of them don't happen. You know, my wife and I did the calculations the other day. For every, was it 87 no's, I get 1 yes. That's the success rate. So if you're emotional, if you're holding on to things, this business is never going to work. But if you just understand, cool, there's a process to this, and trust the process, you'll be okay.
What's the biggest lesson you've learned during your football career that someone can apply to their everyday life?
Just because you've had a thought, it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. And I've lived by that. You know, with sports, you can't, you know, if you make a mistake, you automatically think the whole team hates you. It's not necessarily the case, you know. You know, we think like 80,000 thoughts a day, and 90% of those thoughts are exactly the same thoughts we've had yesterday. So don't think because you've had a thought that it's going to be true. And I think if you realize that in life, you'll flow a lot easier, I think.
I love that.
Yeah.
Sean, thank you for today. Thanks for this episode and for being yourself, being so authentic. And yeah, I feel like a lot of people are going to take a lot of lessons, not just about football. I think our focus was to make it more about life in general. And yeah, I think it was really cool to chat with you today.
Thanks for having me.